Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Just give me a minute. We're going to go through, mute everybody, and then I'll bring certain people in. Tonight's topic, ladies and gentlemen, is we've been talking about the trust. Everybody's been dancing around it. Nobody has ever come up with where they're getting information from, and that has always hurt us. It's easy to talk. The problem is when you are walking into that courtroom and the judge asks you a question, you better be able to give him an answer of where their stuff is coming from, and not from, I got it from this guy off some internet radio show, or I got it from some friend down the street who lives 3 blocks from me. That's not a proper response, and that's been the problem here. Everybody's talked about the trust. Everybody says the birth certificate is the trust, but when you ask them, okay, where is it stated that the birth certificate is the trust? Where in the law did you find it? And they don't ever tell you because, one, they either don't know or they don't want to tell you because they don't want to give up their trade secret. For you new people on this line, I don't play that. You are entitled to know where I get my information from, because if you're going to walk into a courtroom, you better be able to sit down and explain it. The gentleman that taught me many years ago, whenever we talked about this, about the all capital name, and I asked him, okay, you made the statement, where can I find it? And nobody had an answer. We found it, and we put it out on the airwaves. It is in Texas Administrative Code under Corporations, Chapter 79, Section 79.31. It talks about the all caps. The United States Style Manual gets into this. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into the birth certificate, and we're going to show you where the fraud lies in all this stuff and how they are dragging you into that courtroom under a trust name or under an estate. Because we've been trying to find this for years. And part of it has been that if you will go in and you got to say, I'm here for a special appearance. Okay. If I was a judge and you was to tell me that I am here for a special appearance, I would want you to explain it to me, so I know what's special about you. People don't have answers. People can't answer that question. I'm here for a special appearance. What's different about your paperwork that you got the word special appearance here, but I don't see nothing special about your paperwork that makes you special? We're going to get into that tonight. And we're going to explain it. But before I do, I see Harvey's got the phone up. I just unmuted him. So I'll go ahead and give him the opening induction on this, and then we'll get started. Go ahead, Harvey.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, not so much an induction, just to let people know if you're new to the call and you want to be on the big list. The big list will let you know when the calls are, and when documents come out, and when there are private calls and stuff like that. Here's what you do. If you're not a member of the big list and you would like to be on the big list, be kept in the loop, send an email to Rod, R-O-D, dash, class, C-L-A-S-S, dash, subscribe, S-U-B-S-C-R-I-B-E, at Ray Servers. That's the guy's name, Ray, and he has a server, but he has many servers. So it's rayservers.com. So it's RAYSERVERS.com. So to get on the big list, just send an email to, it's automated, by the way. You can't contact people, just the email list contacts you. You send it to rod-class-subscribe at rayservers.com, RAYSERVERS.com. That does it for me. Rod, let's talk. What's going on? I went on Pacer today, and I saw that the opposition wants to needs more time to prepare for the thing. Are you going to talk about the other thing?
No, not right now. I don't want to get into that. I want to talk about what we found under the trust side of the thing.
All right, we won't mention the other thing then. Okay.
No, not right now, because that I want to hold on to it. I just wanted you to verify what I see to make sure that we're on the same page, and we are.
Oh, it's quite a page too, let me tell you. All right.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk tonight about the trust under the birth certificate, on how they are dragging you and I into the courtroom under that all capital name. Since Christmas time up to New Year's, I took a sabbatical. I just got away from everything. I needed to take a break. I needed to get my mind clear and get a new line of thought and a new perspective. Since we did the last show, I've come up with some new information, and Harvey and I have been working on documentation. What I've recently discovered, and we're going to cut to the D.C., District of Columbia, state statutes. This is where I found it. I've also found in some of the other state statutes not quite the same wording. But what we found in Washington, D.C. statutes under birth certificate, and why we, all of us, never went and looked under the state statutes for birth certificates on what the definition of a birth certificate is, what is the definition of a live birth, and what is the definition of a person under a birth certificate. And the fact that the Social Security number is attached to the birth certificate, that the moment the child is born, they automatically get a number immediately. And we're going to talk about all this. This is all going to tie this in to what we've been looking for. Under DC Code, Section 7-201, definitions. You go down to Section 9, it says live birth means the complete expulsion or extraction from its, I-T-S, its mother of a product of human conception. All right, think what I said here, because I talked to some people today, and ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the problem we're having in a courtroom. They are saying something to you, you're not comprehending what was said, because you have your mind on something else and not what was being said. I'm going to read this again. Live birth means the complete expulsion or extraction from its mother of a production of a human conception. Why would they use the word it? Why would they not use extraction from the child's mother? Why are they classifying mother as an it?
Yeah, but more than that, Rod, why are they saying consumption?
Exactly.
For consumption? Doesn't that infer eating?
Yes. Now, going down to section 10, persons. First, we start out with a live birth. Section 10 says person means an individual. Problem of it is, there's no definition that I have come across in the codes for the word individual. It always refers back to a corporation or a trust or an association. But we're going to get into this here tonight because I'm going to try to break this down slow. It says person means an individual, a trust. A person is a trust. T-R-U-S-T. A person is an estate. A person is a partnership. A person is a corporation, including an association, a joint stock companies. Now, wait a minute. You are a live birth, and you are now considered joint stock companies. It further goes in and says, and insurance companies. So you are an insurance company, not a living being, not a flesh and blood man. Everything that we're going to get in here, you're not going to hear the word living soul, living person, living man, living child, living son, living daughter. You're not going to hear none of that. It further says that a person, the district government, or an agency or an instrumentality of the district government. This is what is under a birth certificate definition for the word person.
Okay, now what is this? The District of Columbia
Statute.
Statute or whatever?
Yeah, under 7-201. This one gives you the vital records. It's under Chapter 2, Vital Records, definitions. So you are listed at the time that you are extracted from your mother as a trust, as an estate, as a partnership, as a corporation, including an association, joint stock companies, an insurance company, the district government, or an agency or instrumentality of the district government. That's the definition of the word person under the birth certificate. Now, if you were to get into Title 26, USC Code 7701, which is IRS, and it says under IRS, Title 26, Subtitle F, Chapter 79, Section 7701, when used in this title, were not otherwise distinctly expressed or manifested and capable with the intent thereof. A person. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, an estate, a partnership, an association, a company, or corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, under IRS and under vital statistic records, you are classified as a trust and an estate registered to the state for which you were born, at which point that state, under the 1935 Social Security Act, Title 5, Section 501 and 502, under grants to the state, the day that you came out of your mother and got a number, the state got X amount of dollars for your live birth and federal grant money each fiscal year. Now, I want you to think what we are talking about here. There is the proof that everybody has been looking for to go back and prove that the birth certificate is the trust in this issue. People have danced around it. They have darted around it. Nobody has ever sat down and told you where to find it. So when you now go into these courts, what we are doing and what you need to do, and that is for those who are capable and those who are not, do not run down this path until you get better knowledge behind you to be able to go head-to-head in the courtroom. Because part of the problem that we're running into is this. I want you to think about it, those who have done paperwork. When you are dealing with your paperwork, it says the state of. You will never find an address under the heading of state of. Then they put you down. When you're doing paperwork, you are required to do an address. You're required to tell them where you live so they know where to mail. When you are dealing with the state of or the United States of America, you will never find an address on these people. What I have done in my paperwork, because it has hit the courthouse, I have listed the United States of America as a unknown entity, undisclosed address. I've went back in and used the capital name as a registered government trade name that is either a ward or is a property to the government. Now follow me what we're saying here, because this is important for you to come back in. This is why when I started out, you are to make a special appearance. If you're going to use the state of, and you're going to use that all capital name, and you're going to make a special appearance, you did not take yourself out of the trust side of this thing. If you just leave that name and you don't designate it as a government trade name, as a ward or property or trust, if you don't make the distinction between that name and you, this is where the problem's coming in. Because when I did my paperwork in D.C., I ran some test runs, and I have gave them some fits. Because when I sit down and listed the all-capital name as a government-registered trade name, as a ward or property of the government, and then I come down and put my lowercase name, and I put it as a real party of interest, and because of what we found on the birth certificate and what we found in other languages, which we're going to get into here shortly, I would never use the word a flesh and blood man with a soul on any of my documentation because I could not verify that. Throughout the year that we've been doing this, we have told you people, if you get into Title VII under Agriculture, under 136, look up the word animal. It defines an animal as a vertebrate, which is a man, a mammal, a fish, and a shellfish. So man is listed as an animal. If you got into the word person, we just walked you through what a person means. It's a trust. It's an estate. It's a partnership. It's an insurance company. It is a district government. If you get under human being, under Title I, Chapter 1, Section 8, it defines you as a human being is a Homo sapien. If you get into the Latin side of this, and you look under the Vatican for Latin language, a Homo sapien is an animal. If you look up human being under the Latin side of this, a human being is considered a monster or an animal. Now, I did, and what we are doing is we're asking for a corpus delicti hearing and a writ of habeas corpus, or a corpus delicti and habeas corpus hearing. Now, why would I ask for a corpus delicti and a habeas corpus hearing? We're going back in and we're asking the judge to define the name of Rodney Dale Class, Rodney Dale Class, and Rodney Dale Class. I want the judge to define which one is the capital, which one is which is under the trust, which one is under the animal, and which one is the living soul. Because when the judge calls your name, he does not say, I want the capital Rodney Dale Class to stand up. Or I want the lowercase Rodney Dale Class to stand up. Or I want the Rodney Dale Class that is classified as an animal to stand up. That isn't what he says.
He also doesn't say, Rod, I want Rodney I want Rodney Dale of the family of Class to stand up.
Exactly. So they're coming in and they're using the name. So what you're doing is you're now coming in and you're going to ask for a corpus delicti hearing on the habeas corpus, and you want a declaratory judgment because you want the prosecutor to bring in the accusing party, and you want the prosecutor to identify the accused. Are you accusing the trust name under the birth certificate? Are you accusing the estate name under the birth certificate? Or are you accusing the ward of the government? Because when you said Rodney Darrell Class, it is a trust, it is an estate, and it is a ward of the government. So we are here to distinguish, are we talking about a monster by legal definition? Are we talking about a animal by legal definition? Are we talking a person that is an estate, a trust, a partnership, an insurance company, a joint stock company? Are we talking a person that is an officer of a corporation or an employee of the corporation? Or are we sitting here talking about a living flesh and blood soul? We need to clear this up on what we are doing here. We need to clear all this up when we are sitting here talking. So we need a corpus delicti hearing on this issue. We want the prosecutor to come in and we want him to classify, we want him to define, and we want the judge to give us a declaratory judgment on what is being charged in this courtroom. Because unless we get a declaratory judgment, until we find out who is the corpus delicti, they can't move. Now, some of you sit back and say, well, how does this apply to me? Let's sit here and talk about you are in a child support case in a courtroom or a child custody battle in a courtroom. Your Honor, we need to clarify the child under legal definitions, under what is defined under vital statistics for birth. When it says a person, it says it is a trust and an estate. And it says it is registered to the state. Is it not true that all birth certificates are registered to the state? All children are registered through birth? Yes, they are. Is it also not true that under the Social Security Act of 1935, is it also not true that the state receives federal grant money for that child being born and they're receiving a live birth certificate? Does the state not receive federal grant money? That judge has now got a problem here because they can't charge you whenever the state holds the child as a ward. Now the state now has to pick up the tab because now we made the connection. You aren't responsible for it because you are still considered a ward of the state yourself, so therefore the government has to pick up the tab. What does this mean with IRS? Same thing, ladies and gentlemen. The name that they're bringing in is the trust name. You have to go back in and do a corpus delicti hearing and address the name side of this thing, but you need to come in as a third party of interest or a real party of interest or the injured party of interest. You have to make the distinction between the all capital name being the trust and the living man. You have to make the distinction. And when you don't come in on the third party of this, you're still coming in under that trust name, and the judge cannot hear you, see you, because you're part of the trust. this is what we have been missing. Tying that trust into the name. It's easy to sit back and say, well, that birth certificate's a trust. Anybody can say that, but if you can't show where it is tied in, that's the problem. Everything that I have done in these courtrooms, anything that I've ever sit back and said, I have been able to walk them through their book and sit down and say, here it is, here's your writing, this is what you wrote. Now explain to me, why aren't you following this? This is going to be one of the hardest things for some of you new people to get into. But ladies and gentlemen, we are breaking this down and showing you the right way on this, because you now can walk in with the statutes that when you say that birth name is a trust, you now have the law that sits down and shows that it is a trust. Well, that's Washington, D.C. You're absolutely right. And is that not the government of this country? Is that not the capital? It's their rules, it's their regulation, and is that not the guiding force across this country? They'll sit here and tell you it's when it's their convenience. It falls under full faith and credit. But I want each of you to go back in, and I want you to look in your own states for some of the definitions. Well, I just went through about 4 of them, and D.C. is where I found the one that's the one I started with first. But they all have definitions. They all go back and show that the live birth is an expulsion out of its mother, and it says that it has to have a Social Security number. This is what we're coming in and doing, because I did something here, and that's what Harvey brought up here earlier. I did something that nobody's ever done. We're going to wait till after the 23rd, then we'll get into it and we'll talk about it. But because of the way that I came into this thing, because I named the state as an unknown entity, no known address, and I did the all capital name as a ward, as property of the government, then I came in as a party of interest, as a real living man. Some things happen here that normally don't happen. But this is what we have been missing. So now if you're able to get into that courtroom and you can address this with the judge before you get across the bar, it says, excuse me, I want a declaratory judgment here. I want a definition. If I am a defendant, am I a defendant as a trust or an estate, or am I a defendant as a living man? The judge is going to have to give you a decision. You can't sidestep it, because until you clarify what and who is being charged in this courtroom, well, you're being charged. Well, wait a minute. You is not an answer. I'm asking you because I can sit here and prove that the name that you're charging is a trust and an estate. I can prove this in your own laws. So if you're charging the trust and the estate, then we have a very serious issue here. Because number one, the government cannot sue itself, which is what it's doing. Because when it's suing the trust, it is suing itself. And you cannot interfere in them suing themselves. That's not your job. But they're dragging us in. So now we have to make a distinction of who and what is being drawn into this courtroom. That prosecutor is going to have to answer it. And when you go back and tie this into the 1935 Social Security Act, that the state gets federal grant money for every live birth, and you tied into the Alien Registration Act of 1940, and that Alien Registration Act of 1940 is the birth certificate. That's the requirement. That's the proof that they have to have in order to collect the Social Security.
Now, Rod, may I say something?
Go ahead, Harvey.
So when you're asking this judge for a declaratory judgment, or you're in the court and you're doing what Rod is saying you should do in front of the judge, saying, you know, we need a decision here. What am I? What are you classifying me at? That is the point at which the possibility that they will probably find a way of dismissing under some kind of a technicality, because they don't want this out there.
Exactly. And the thing of it is, ladies and gentlemen, I thought about this, of sitting on this until court date. But because certain documents that I have put in hit the courts, laying this whole thing out and explaining it, I've decided to go ahead and broadcast this, and I sent Harvey a zip folder of a trust file of putting this information, which Harvey is going to be working on, and it's going to take a little time for him to get it out. But I have sent this out to other people for them to get a hold of and start using, because the thing of it is, everybody is in major peril at this time. You're losing your home, and now the process of it is, when you're walking into that courtroom on a foreclosure, excuse me, Your Honor, I need the lawyers over here to identify the habeas corpus in this courtroom, as these are the legal definitions of all these terminologies. And the name that they brought in is a trust name to which the state of whatever is getting federal funding off of that birth certificate. And why are they not suing the state instead of dragging me in here when the state has me listed as a trust or as an estate, and the state has already received the money through federal grants? Why are they not suing the state?
And Rod, why are they not accessing money from the trust for whatever violation you say I may have committed?
Exactly. So now you can get the judge to go back and bring a charge against them, because now they took your promissory note and started turning it into the state for the bank to be paid. They turned around and stole your promissory note, and they sold it on the open market, and now they've embezzled.
And they want you to pay for the money. They want you to pay the note.
Exactly.
The trust should be paying the note, shouldn't it?
That's exactly right, and that's what we're trying to get into tonight. This may be over some of your heads because you're new, but ladies and gentlemen, I did a show here yesterday breaking this down, and we're trying to break it down today, even trying to make it a little more simpler, is the fact that we now found the law that made the birth certificate a trust. Because if you walk into a court and says, Your Honor, my birth certificate's a trust, and he's going to say, prove it. You're sunk. This is part of what's wrong with some of the teaching out here with some of these other people. They are not telling you where they got their information from.
They're not showing you the black ink on the white paper that you can show the judge.
Exactly. And they're allowing you to walk into these courtrooms and get hung after you paid these guys money for their paperwork, and they snickered all the way while they walked off and said, he's going to get hung because he can't prove the paperwork. This has always got me into a pissy mood here. And why on this show we have tried to sit down and write this stuff out and show you where it comes from. So when you walk into that courtroom, it's like John did down here on a traffic ticket. he was charged for driving a motor vehicle, but when he brought in the definitions under Title 49 CFR, Section 523.23, that he was driving an automobile, not a motor vehicle, he got his case dismissed. Because he was able to come back and show there was a distinction between motor vehicle and automobile.
And they think that we don't know the difference.
Exactly. The problem of it is, if you don't know where to go get the information, you can't make the argument. What we're looking at is this. We're opening up the door to be able to come back and sue these people. We have sued them in their individual capacity, and that was always a problem because they kicked it out because the word individual refers back to a corporation. It refers back to the fictional side of this thing. If we would start suing them in their flesh and blood Christian name as a man, living man or woman, and we would make reference points back to that they were under a contract for wages and compensation in a public office, we're not suing the public office. We're suing the living man that held that public office because he breached his fiduciary duty and he violated the civil rights of the people. This is another reason why we're talking about getting this out soon, because it goes back to what Cornforth sit here and said in his audios about prohibition. 80,000 people did a massive lawsuit across this country against the federal government on prohibition, and they dropped prohibition because they could not handle the lawsuits. We were to go back in and do the lawsuits on the living man that holds that office, not as President Obama, but as Barack Obama, the living man, the flesh and blood man who swore an oath and under a contract for wages and compensation. This now opens up a whole new avenue because now you name that party as a living, breathing man, and if you will name the judge, which is what I did in my paperwork, we named the judge, because Harvey and I worked on this, as a living, breathing soul that has to be honorable and have integrity under his contract to that office. We just took that judge out of a fictional side and we now made him a flesh and blood human being. As we would understand human being, not as their understanding as an animal. We brought him over to the common law side. This is what we've been missing. This is what I have been working on here in the last several weeks, because I've listened to Carl Lutz, and he's got some good information. I-man. But then I got thinking about it. I-man. He never went back in and clarified what a man was, and they could come back in and say, well, under agriculture, Title 7, Section 136, this guy doesn't know. He came in as a fish.
Sorry, didn't mean to laugh, but
yeah, it's the truth. This man didn't know. He come in as a fish. We can't hear a fish either. So we don't have to honor him because he's coming in as a fish or a bird or some type of animal. He can come in as a dog. So if we would come back in and specify this in our paperwork, that when we use the word man, this is the term that we mean it as a flesh and blood living soul. Now that puts them into a position of the common law side that they now have to come up with a flesh and blood for an injury. Because even under Webster's dictionary, I looked up human being under Webster's dictionary. And it says a higher evolution of primate.
Sorry.
This is the point. It's a higher evolution of primate that is still an animal. So even in Webster's dictionary, the word human being means a primate or an animal.
Right. It doesn't say anything about a living man or woman with a soul.
Exactly. And this is what we've been missing. People have been dancing around this for so long, but they never would hit it dead center. This is what we're getting into tonight, that when you're walking into that courtroom, whether it is a traffic case, the fact that they're bringing that all-capital name in is the birth certificate trust name, because if you have a taillight out, there is no injured party. They're busting you for a administrative violation. You're not part of the administration.
That's right.
You're not part of the administration. When they're sitting here saying, well, you owe child support, excuse me, would you please sit here and let's talk about this little sheet of paper I have here, Judge. I want you to tell me what I have here, and I want you to read the 3 little words across the top. I want it on the record. That judge will never read it.
What words are you referring to?
Federal Reserve note.
Oh, right.
The lawyer will never read the 3 little words, because the moment they sit here and said Federal Reserve notes, now they have to tell you what is the definition of the Federal Reserve note, and they have to tell you it's the obligation of the United States.
That's a fine howdy-do.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This is how they have intermingled this among us with what we're doing. These are the pieces that we have been missing, but these are the pieces that we have been working on throughout the years, that we're finally putting this piece in this puzzle right down to the nitty-gritty of trying to short it down to the quickest argument in these courtrooms to get out of these courtrooms. So when you're in that bankruptcy, is this your signature? Yes, that's my name, but now we need to ask you a question. Does that name reflect the trust name under the birth certificate that is a trust in an estate under the bankruptcy, which the state has already been paid for, or are you referring that as the living man's name? And if you're referring to it as the living man, where is the living man that is the injured party here? And why didn't they not sit here and turn this into the governor or the attorney general, which is the receiver and the trustee for the federal grant money under the Social Security Act? Why did they not turn this into the governor?
To have him pay it?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know why they didn't do that. Gosh. Because they knew that we were so ill-informed that we would take responsibility for it, or at least think we had responsibility for it.
Exactly. We've been conned into this because we never knew any better, and a lot of the people that is teaching this are lawyers or judges, and they're only giving you tidbit information to sit down to get you into a bind on what they're doing. They're not lying to you. They're just not telling you the whole truth.
And they may not be totally competent in the subject matter. They may not even know themselves, some of them. Right?
Point being, with what we've got into, what we've discovered under the birth certificate side, we actually now can go back and show that under the vital statistics, that the word person under the birth certificate is a trust. It is an estate. That's the same thing under IRS Code 7701 under person. It is a trust. It is an estate. So when IRS is coming after you, this is the first question. Are you attacking the trust? Do you not have the ability under a form of yours of a 1099 to go discharge the debt under the trust name?
Right. Tap the value of the trust. Go and talk to them. Don't bother me.
Go talk to the governor. Go talk to the attorney general. They are the receivers. They are the trustees. Because I come across some people here this last week that I talked to, and I'm not going to give no names out because I'm not going to get them into trouble. But they actually work for the federal government on the federal funding and grant side. They sit down. We had a conversation. The governor or the attorney general, anytime there is any federal grants or federal funding going into the state, they are the receivers. They're the one who has to sign for it. They're the one who has to accept and sign the contract. These agencies can't do it. The governor or the attorney general has to sign for it. So they are the receivers. They are the trustees in this deal. I hope some of you are getting the drift of what we're getting into and explaining this. Because it's going to change if you can explain it and you can walk it and talk it. And you can stand your ground on it. We're going to start seeing a change in these courtrooms because they're not going to want to keep playing, because once we start exposing the corpus delicti in this courtroom, that it is not a flesh and blood, but it is an administrative agency, or it is another trust. A trust cannot sue a trust, especially when it belongs to the government. This would be in the same fashion for you to go down and bring a charge against yourself in the court. You're going to go down and hire a lawyer to defend you, and you're going to go hire a lawyer to charge you. They're not going to do it.
It makes no sense.
Go ahead, Harvey.
I said they wouldn't do it because it makes no sense.
Exactly. So this is what they have done, is that by us being brought in as the ward or the state, they are charging their own system, but they've drugged you and I into this because they had to have a flesh and blood to justify embezzling the money. Now the problem is this. That money was given to the state to pay off the debts and to take care of its bills. That money was not given to the state for the court and the lawyers and the judges to go embezzle it off of the state for their own private retirement plan.
Or to make us pay twice.
Exactly. And we're not paying because we're using Federal Reserve notes, so all we're doing is creating another debt, and they're stealing your labor. Now, the other issue here tonight is that I made a trip to Duke University into their law library. Their law library has all the congressional books that the Library of Congress has, identical. While we was in there, we started looking for the validation of the ratification of the codes. What we found was this. We brought this up on a previous show that Volume 43 of the Statutes at Large stops on March 4th, 1925. And Volume 44, Part 2, it picks up on December 16th, 1925. We're missing 9 months between March and December, roughly. And Volume 44, Part 1, says December 7th, the codes and the laws of the United States was codified. Listen to what I said. It says the laws, the statutes at large, was codified into the codes and the laws of the United States. Codification means they put them in order. They put apples with apples, pears with pears, peaches with peaches. Anything that dealt with banking went into Title 12. Anything that dealt with criminal activity went into Title 18. When they passed H.R. 10,000, which is Public Law 440, Public Law 440, when they passed it, they only passed in order to codify it and to put it into a category so they could easily find it. Under Public Law 441 was the publication. The librarian was there. She was a college professor for the law school. She's working in the library, and then she goes back and does her classes. She asked me, what are you looking for? I said, what I'm looking for is the ratification in the Act of Congress. Here is 440, where they sit down and they took the statutes at large and they codified them into organization. She says, you're right, that's what they did. Under 441, they ordered it to be printed on June 30th, 1926. She says, yes, they publicized it. Where is 440 and a half? She says, what do you mean? I said, well, I walked her through the statutes at large. I says, you see where if the state wanted a bridge, they had to get a congressional act passed to get a bridge. She says, yes. I said, you see here where if they wanted a piece of property, they had to have a congressional act passed in order to get a piece of property off the government. She says, yes, they do. I said, you can see here where they passed the public law to codify the statutes into organizing them. She says, you're right. I said, here's the law that set them to print. Where is the law that enacted it from the time they codified it, that enacted it into law in order for them to print it? She said, well, they are the law. I said, no. They are missing. She says, well, the way this works is that they have to take each individual law and they have to pass it individually. I says, you're exactly right. They cannot codify 50 volumes at one time because it wouldn't work. Where is the act where they took each individual statute and they turned it into a code and they passed it? Where's that law? She says, you're talking over my head. I said, how can I be talking over your head? You're a teacher. I said, if I could show you where they codified it, where they printed it, shouldn't there be a law where they passed it? She said, well, it is the law. I said, no. Because I showed her in volume 44, part 1, it says right here, it is prima facie law. It is presumed to be the law. It doesn't say it is, it says presumed. It's prima facie. Right here, it shows you that the Congress passed it, and it says that the Senate did not. So if the Senate did not pass it, then how and where did it get passed into law if the Senate did not agree to it? She says, you're talking way over my head. Now, she's a college professor. I says, okay, so she left. She got out of there. Well, later on, I was in here, and I started looking because they said that the USC codes was put into positive law in 1948. Well, I found it in 1947. Title I and up through was put into positive law in 1947. So then we started working back. We got into 1931. 1931 gets in and it states that the revised statutes, certain of them was repealed and put into the United States Code. I said, no, they can't do that. she came back and we got talking about this. I said, look, I got another question to ask you. If they had to pass a congressional act to change the revised statutes, which was the first set of books to create the statutes at large, if they had to have a congressional act to change the revised statutes to the statutes at large, and then they had an act to codify the statutes at large into their prospective volumes, and they had to pass a law in order to print it, where is the law that took the codification of the, listen to the words here because I'm going to explain to you. That's what I told us. Look, listen to the words. I want you to see the words. It says, the codes and laws of the United States. That's the name of these codes, right? The codes and laws of the United States. She says, yes, that's the name of it. Then you show me where they passed the law changing it from the codes and the laws of the United States to the United States codes.
Yep.
Here's where they switched it from revised statutes to the statutes at large, from the statutes at large to the codes and laws of the United States for codification. Where did they change the name of the codes and the laws of the United States to United States Code? She got out of there. I lost her.
Oh, man. So even those that we think know what's going on don't know what's going on.
Exactly. So what they're teaching, they're not teaching, again, they're not teaching law. They're teaching theory and they're teaching concept of law in these colleges, which goes back to that book I told you people to get your hands on called The American Lawyers of 1907. This book from 1907, which was 107 years ago, the lawyer that wrote this was complaining at that time of the very same things that we're talking about today. He point blank says they were never taught law in school. They were taught theory and they were taught concept.
A direct link to that book, by the way, is in every big list that has come out since we learned about that book. So save your big lists because it's got all sorts of valuable information in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we exposed the lawyer fraud under the lies, the fraud, and the scam of several shows back. We went in and showed where no lawyer can walk into a courtroom because a lawyer is nothing more than a friend of the court. There's no legislative law that created the lawyer. However, there is a legislative law that created the attorney, and there is a distinct difference between attorney and lawyer. Attorney, by legal definitions under the statutes, works for the Attorney General's office as a prosecutor. A lawyer under freelance is nothing more than a next friend who's coming in on behalf, but through the Bar Association, he comes in as a friend of the court. There's no legislative law that created the lawyer.
There's no law that says a lawyer is the only one that can represent somebody else.
Exactly. This is their own private bar association. This is their own private ruling. And this is what we're getting into and start laying this stuff out, because now you can start nailing the lawyer. In the moment he tells you, well, this is frivolous, this is unintelligible, you don't know how to read the law. Now he's telling you that if you don't know how to read the law, then you cannot be held accountable to something you're not capable of understanding. And this is why they don't want you to bring the laws into the courtroom, because when you're walking in there on a standard case, and a lot of you guys are going to walk in under that state of and that capital name, the moment you walked in, you did not know that you were a trust or an estate or that you were dead. And this is why when you put paperwork in, you can't use codes and statutes and constitution because you are a piece of paper. You have no standing because you are a ward. You are a trust. You are an estate. If you just use the state of and your name, this is why we've had problems. Because I have done some paperwork in this federal court case that Harvey and I have talked about, and some of the results that I've gotten from this paperwork has led me to this conclusion. Because when I filed that 68-page criminal complaint against the prosecutor, I named that prosecutor as a living flesh and blood man under a contract for wages and compensation under an oath of office. And I tell you what, they crapped. They got that paperwork out of there because they said I did not file for leave of court to file that paperwork in. I did not file for leave of court. But previous paperwork after that, I've got it in because I came in as that third party naming the all capital as a ward or state property or government property, and I made a distinction between the property and myself. And I got paperwork put in.
Did you get that 68-page you put in?
Nope, I got it right now. I'm sitting on it right now.
I didn't think you had resubmitted it. Okay. I was just...
Not yet.
Okay. But now you know how to get it in, don't you?
Now I know how to get it in.
That's great.
Know how to get it in as a third party into this thing. But, ladies and gentlemen, I don't sit down and tell you and not go through it myself because a lot of this stuff, because of what I'm doing, I am testing the waters myself and getting the results. And because how they jump, how they move tells me how I need to modify my document to get it in. Because they always give you the answer. They always give you the answer.
But some of them don't realize they're giving you the answer and that you might take the answer and run with it.
No, because this has been their standing operating procedure. Because when he told me I didn't file for leave of court, that's because I didn't file for my end of appearance. And when I filed for my end of appearance, documents got in there. I got in here as the living man, not as the ward, because I made a distinct separation between the two. So tonight's call, basically, ladies and gentlemen, is to try to get you to understand, and you're probably going to have to go back, listen to the archives, by all means. That's why this stuff is being recorded. And I want to tell you what, the information that you're pulling off of this, if you were dealing with some of these other people, it would cost you out the yin-yang, and you would not get the information that you're getting here tonight. We're not charging for this. I do take donations for what we're doing because it's helping you, and if it keeps you from paying $5,000 out for a lawyer, you know, if you had to cough up $5,000 for a lawyer, you would find a way to cough it up. Any and all donations that you want to give can come this way, and it comes to P.O. Box 435, High, H-I-G-H, Shoals, S-H-O-A-L-S, High Shoals, North Carolina, 28077. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to help you, and this is an education. It costs me money to file paperwork. It costs me money to do experiments and then give you the answers and give you the results of what we are doing here. You're benefiting from this. And if some of you are looking at IRS, if you could walk in here on an IRS and you owe $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000, and you could walk in here and have that debt canceled out to zero because you went back in and proved the trust name of how they did it, look at what you just saved here for a free program here tonight. You're going in for a traffic ticket. You're now challenging them on the name, because if the name is registered to the state, so is the vehicle under the MSO, the Manufacturer Statement of Origin. That Manufacturer Statement of Origin is the birth certificate for that automobile. That's the ownership. But all the stuff that we're talking about here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, if you are not sure of yourself, you don't think you can, because, ladies and gentlemen, when you've never been in court before, trust me, you get nervous, you get jittery, your mind starts going different directions, and, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get hung. It is better for you to plea bargain out for right now. Get yourself out of the jam the easiest way you can, and at a later date, learn this stuff and go back and fight them. Do not try to go head to head if you're not prepared, because they're going to hand your head to you and they're going to hand your butt to you, and what you're going to end up doing is really pissing off this judge, and he's going to make an example out of you to make you ever regret ever thinking about this again. Now, some of you, when they do this to you, you're going to go with your tail between your legs like a dog. Me, on the other hand, all it did was make me dig in my heels and go head to head with these people that much harder. Because part of it, before I walked into that courtroom, I had my facts before me. I had their statutes before me. I knew I was right, and they were wrong. And when I went in there, I went head to head. Some of you are not able to do this. Some of you need to practice. Some of you need. And some of this stuff, I want to tell you right now, I have learned this stuff over the years. I have got probably a total of 20-some years, but I've really been hot and heavy into this since 2001, and more so since 2006. But I've got close to 20 years under my belt. So I'm not something new coming out here, and then all of a sudden, here it is. Because the attorneys that I have, the lawyers that I've had in the past, as I've dealt with attorneys for the prosecution, for the Attorney General, I have put their tails between their legs. When I've dealt with lawyers, I have swamped them and put their tail between their legs. Because when I start going after it, they can't respond. Their whole thing is, well, this is frivolous, it's unintelligible, it's nonsensical. And when they tell me this, is that, well, these laws that you're bringing up is nonsensical. They're nonsensical. They're nonsensical. So what you're telling me is that the laws that the prosecutor used is nonsensical. So you're going to go tell the judge that the laws are nonsensical, right? Piss the lawyer right off. Well, that ain't what I'm talking about. So didn't you tell me the laws are nonsensical? You can't have this both ways. This is where you got to have more answers than they have questions. You've got to be able to answer every single question and lay it out and baffle them with knowledge and understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a battle of wits, of intelligence with these people. This is not arm wrestling. This isn't sumo wrestling. This is a mind game. It's head-to-head, knowledge against knowledge. understanding against understanding, and we're trying to break this down to the most simplest form, and we have finally got this down to the birth name, the birth certificate, the vital records that actually identifies that person as a trust and as an estate and as everything else. And when you get into all the other definitions of the word person, no matter where you go into the statutes, it defines it as everything but a living being. Everything but a flesh and blood soul. It defines it as everything as but that. But we had to find the birth certificate side of how it defined it under the birth certificate. And once we got that, there's the foundation that you're not being brought in there as a living man. You're being brought in there as that trust that everybody's talking about. You're being brought in as property, the estate, the ward. That goes back to the birth certificate that when you was born, you were turned over to the state by your mother because the maiden name gave birth, the married name signed you over to the state for a ward. And that's how the state got into this. So think about how you want to argue this, ladies and gentlemen. Think about how you want to go head to head with these people. You don't get arrogant. You don't get nasty. You just sit here and say, hey, here it is, here it is, here it is. Prove it wrong. These are your writings. Your law society wrote this up. Your legal system wrote this up. Your lawyers wrote this thing up. These are your definitions. This is how you define these things. So how else and what else are we supposed to use here when you're charging me under them and it says the word person and it says a trust, an estate? What are you charging here? It sure ain't the living person. And they rely on that you're not smart enough to go back and look up the law that you was charged with, because 99% of the people will not take the effort when they get charged with the law. They will not go look it up and see what the charges are. Well, I got charged for this, and I'll just leave it at that, and I'll just throw the ticket. They won't go back and do the research. They won't go back and see what they were charged for and how it was taken out of context. That's the number one problem. You don't do the research. If I'm being charged for something, I want to know what I'm being charged with. It's like the incident here with the blue light. Your Honor, Mr. Class had a blue light. It was not manufacturer original equipment. Okay, fine, I object. What do you object to? I can sit here and show you where these police cruisers doesn't come from the manufacturer of the blue light either. They have a private contractor in Charlotte that puts them on. Well, we're going to skip that part of the law. Knowing, ladies and gentlemen, knowing, being able to have an answer. How many of you, if you never heard this, would have been able to come back and say, well, the law says it's manufacturer original equipment, that you could have come back and say, excuse me, I object. Because I can show you where not one single cruiser came from the manufacturer with the blue light and the decals on it. Because number one, I went down to the dealer and I asked them, they said no, they have a private contractor that comes out of Charlotte that does it for them. That's not manufacturer original equipment now. How many of you could sit down and say, okay, we have a problem here because here's the job description for this police officer. It says he is to sit down and be a bailiff in this courtroom. He is to serve paperwork on behalf of this courtroom. He is to work at the prison. Now, what did I leave out? Where is the law that allows this man to come out on the street and give me a ticket? Because his job description only is a bailiff, a paper server, and a prison guard. Where does he have the authority under the law to come out and arrest, hijack, kidnap, handcuff, detain, and steal me off the street? This is how vital this stuff is for you to understand. This is how vital it is for you to be able to talk this stuff. because I am retired and I really don't have anything better to do than do this all day long, I talk to people. That's what makes me so good at it. Most of you people have lives that you really don't have the time to devote to do it what I'm doing. So we're trying to give you the shortcuts on all this stuff to make it simple for you.
Oh, speaking of that, Rod, are you going to do any more seminars coming up in the near future or not?
Yeah, once I find out what's going to happen in D.C., then we're going to start setting up seminars.
Okay, all right, because there was a question on the board. Are you going to do another Tennessee seminar or whatever? So, okay. All right.
Yeah, once I get what we're dealing with in D.C., then we're going to start setting up some seminars. Because, see, now we've got a problem here. We're going to put you under a gag order. Would you please show me the law that you can do it is? Put me under a gag order, and while you're doing it, I would like to have your prosecutor, I want him to get a certification of the law, how it was passed by the House and Senate, and I want him to produce it that you can put me under a gag order.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Because you've got to remember something here. If you're going to put me under a gag order has to work two ways. And that means that you have to quit your criminal activities if I can't talk about it. If I can't talk, you have to quit. As long as you are continuing your criminal activities, you're now in breach of the gag order.
I had never thought of it like that. That's interesting.
You can't tell me to keep my mouth shut about your corruption if you're going to keep your corruption up. Now you're making me aiding and abetting in a criminal activity. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a simple logic. All right, I got a couple callers I want to come in. Let me bring in some callers. We're getting into close to the bottom of the hour. Gene, go ahead.
Thank you, Rod. I was looking at what you're actually speaking of, and in fact, in Title II of the United States Code, it goes into the powers of the Congress and what they have to do when they go in order to enact a law or new law, having to pass the House with 2/3 and then the Senate, and then put it in front of the President for signature. But yet Title II is part of that 1 through 50 that was never been enacted into law
Exactly.
itself. But if you read in there, it gives us all the power of the Congress. It explains it. You know, exercise of congressional rule-making powers, so it's called, and it says the Congress shall enact the provisions. But it goes on. Probably should be this title. It even makes a quotation. It should be this title, quote unquote. And anyway, I just wanted to share that because it goes right in line with what you're speaking. Yet it goes into it speaks it all. It's Title II. But I wanted to share that because it's right in line with what we're talking about tonight. That none of this has actually been put into effect, and the entire 1 through 50 being published and put on back in 1925 and then published in 26 proves that it's in violation of its own code.
Exactly. But see, up to recently, people have never been able to go back and make the issue. Title 18, people pulled the paperwork. It shows that it was never ratified by the Senate, and they were absolutely correct. But they only, Title 18, they did not go after the entire volumes.
Yes. But
and that's what it's like. A couple of people that I've talked to in the last several days says, Rod, the difference between what you're doing and a lot of us do, we're out here trying to trim the branches off of the tree. While we're up here trimming the branches, you're cutting the roots out from underneath the tree.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because without the root, the tree can't stand.
Exactly. So while you're trying to sit here and trim off the branches, I'm cutting the root off.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do not recommend anybody to go do this if you're not prepared. I'm telling you, there's a hell of a risk here on you and what's going on. Because like I said, I'm running a risk, a huge risk in D.C. Am I under a gag order right now? Absolutely not. I'm not under anything other than a strict order to stay the hell out of D.C. until I'm called up for a court date. I can go any place else I want, but I can't go to Washington, D.C. unless I notify them I'm going there. Point being is that this is how I have got them so rattled for what we're doing. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not a kid's game that we're playing here. This is a very serious game that we're being played here. Because what I am exposing here tonight on the trust, that we now can go back and prove that the name is the trust. And when they drag us into the courtroom, they are dragging the trust into the courtroom. Being able to prove this and go head-to-head with them on this, ladies and gentlemen, you are exposing so much that they never thought we'd ever get to that point on. But if we can start doing this across the country, and I wanted to wait till my paperwork hit, and it got filed before I opened this up. Now that I know it's filed, now we're bringing it out for the rest of you that who understand it, who's capable of doing it. Go bring a claim against them. Go bring a claim in their living capacity on a civil rights violation. Name them under their fiduciary duty. Don't name the office. Just say John Doe here under the office of police department as a living man did sign a contract and did accept wages and compensation to perform a duty in a job and has breached his duty in that public position as a fiduciary trustee. There's ways of wording this, but you don't want to go in and name them in their official capacity as a police officer. You want to go in and name them as a John Doe in breach of a duty. It'd be no different than you suing your neighbor. You're bringing your neighbors in on the same side. Even though he may work for the Ford Motor Company or some other company, you're not suing him in the name of that company. You're suing him in his private capacity under his flesh and blood name. That's how we have to go back and sue these people, in their flesh and blood name, in the county courts and federal courts. And if we was to start a massive lawsuit across this country naming the receivers and the trustees of the state that received the federal grant money on behalf of the Social Security Department because of every live birth certificate, and they are not paying off the debt, they're not discharging to debt. If there was a massive lawsuit going across this country on this, you would see a change real quick. Real quick, you would see a change. And if you was to go back and sue the head of DOT, not under his official capacity, but sue him as a man who took an office under wages and contract, you've got him in breach of his contract, his fiduciary duty, that you were not required to have a driver's license and a tag on your vehicle because you drive an automobile, not a motor vehicle. You're not in commerce. You're private. But let me say this before you go out and do this. Do I believe in a driver's license? Yes, I do. I believe everybody ought to have some type of ID that shows that they're qualified and capable of driving. But let me pass this by you. Let's sit here and say that your car breaks down. You have to get a rental because you don't have a driver's license. You can no longer get a rental because you don't have a license for commerce. That's the downfall of not having a license. There's other things that we can get around on. Do not shoot yourself in the foot because you get a hangnail. But I want you people to think about what we got into tonight on that trust name under the birth certificate. It's under Washington, D.C.'s statutes under 7-201, Chapter 2. It's in the D.C. codes for vital statistic that defines a person as a trust, as an estate, as a partnership, as a corporation, as an association, joint stock companies, an insurance company. Whoever thought the moment you became born that you automatically became an insurance company and a joint stock and you become the district government and an agency and instrumentality of the district government? Whoever thought that we had this tagged on us the moment we came out of the chute? We would assume that we was considered a miracle and a live birth. And we got all these job titles. We got all these job titles and didn't know it. And we can't get a job with all these titles. So think about a little bit about what we're getting into here tonight. And that's the same thing under Title 26 under IRS. Get into 7701 for the phrase person as a trust, as an estate. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this goes into a huge, huge IRS issue of coming in and nailing them on this. You could go back and show where the state, the trustees, the governor, and the attorney general failed to pay the tax on your labor. They didn't take the money out of the trust. They should be charged, not you. You need to point the finger over there. Hey, this is your definition of the word person. You have me down as a trust. The fiduciary trustee, the receiver, is the governor and the attorney general. Go knock on their door. I hope this helps some of you here tonight to get a better understanding, and hopefully this gives you information that you were missing to help put the puzzles together that you're working with. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is a whole new revelation of what we're talking about here and what we now can walk in and go prove in these courts. We now can prove the all-capital name is a ward in the trust. We now can go walk in here and make the distinct difference between that name and who and what we are, because now we want a corpus delicti hearing and a habeas corpus hearing. We want the prosecutor to come in and define who and what is the body in that courtroom. That goes back into what Carl was sitting here saying, that Crawford versus Washington. Where's the body? Who is the body? We have to identify the body. They're not identifying anything. You're not making the issue. You are not separating yourself. You're not sitting down and making a distinction that this name is the corporate name. This is the registered trade name. I am the real party of interest here. I am the one who is being injured because of this trust name. If you want to embezzle all the trust, I don't care. Leave me alone. The moment you drag me off the street and you bring me into this courtroom, I'm now become the injured party in this courtroom. I'm now the damaged party in this courtroom. So give it some thought here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on what we're talking about. And I said, I hope it helps you. Like I told you, we're pretty much at the end, but as I get new information that is really vital, like this stuff, I will bring it up in a heartbeat to get it out to you, because, ladies and gentlemen, there's always pieces that we may be missing. We don't have the whole thing, but we got more than anybody else does out here. And we got better detail where it's at for you to be able to use it and walk in with it. I want to thank you for being in here tonight. I appreciate your time. And like I said, donation here, ladies and gentlemen. Donation helps me file paperwork off, helps me get back and forth in some of these court cases of what we're doing. They may be my court case, but you are getting the benefit of it, and you're getting the knowledge off of it. And I don't see anybody else out here sharing this information with you on a lot of this in the detail that we're giving it to you. Like I've said before, veterans have paid for this. Arlington Cemetery is full of them. Our cemeteries are full. We got a lot of disabled veterans. We got a lot of veterans in this country. They risk their life for your freedom. You can't buy this information. That's why I do not sell it. That's why if you'll send me an external hard drive, I will give you the information. Donations are always welcome because donations help. And if you want to send donation, the address is P.O. Box 435, High, H-I-G-H, Shoals, S-H-O-A-L-S, High Shoals, North Carolina, 28077. Because we're here to share information with you. I'm not here to sell you information. I'm not here to barter with you. I'm here to give you the help that you need, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is as much your freedom that's being stripped as it is mine. And if I'm being stripped, you're being stripped. And if I have a means of coming up with answers, then I have a duty to sit down to share this so we all can benefit from it. Because we need to take our country back, and we need to hold these public offices accountable for the money that they have maintained out of these offices and not doing a service for the people. This is no different than you working in a factory, drawing a paycheck, and doing nothing. That's exactly what these people are doing. They're drawing a paycheck, and they're not doing anything but railroading and stealing off of us. Have a good night. Thank you for being in here. And if anything else comes up, I'll give you a call. I've got to be in court on the 23rd of January, which is next Thursday. The hearing is at 11 a.m. Visitors are welcome.
And the address is in the big list, so.
Yep. It's at the United States Federal Courthouse. It's at 333 Constitutional Avenue.
And the courthouse has a specific name. It's the Prettyman Courthouse or something like that.
Yeah, and I believe it's room 27A.
Okay.
But, ladies and gentlemen, we need to work together. We need to share information because we're all in the same boat. And if the boat sinks for one of us, the boat sinks for all of us. And if you can't swim, then you better learn how to share and plugging the holes up in the boat, because you're going to go down with it if you don't. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, Rod.